Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Well, out of the frying pan and into the fire. This is going to be a fun one. It's funny, I'm almost overconscious that this video can, sort of set the tone for the year, and I really don't want it to be like that. So here's the deal. Just before we all broke for the holidays, Blizzard unveiled a really manipulative business practice that is straight out of Mickey Mouse's playbook. Now, we then also began to see a bunch of the Activision-directed cost-cutting, along with a fresh report that gave us more background, and of course, often companies, they choose to release bad news just before a major holiday or a big event, and that's a classic move, because yeah, the bad news is still going to sting, but people are going to be busy with other things, they're going to forget, and all be back to normal. Well, while I technically was off work, I'm not letting Blizzard off the hook for this one. I think if this coming year for me was to have a theme, I think it would be honesty unpolished. As Blizzard begin to slip, it's just all the more important to just go directly in, just straightforward with them. But then equally, it's also important to not be carried away by any given narrative and be thrown in a direction. So I expect this will be a year both of strongly positive and strongly negative coverage, as really the company is just going from PR blunder to PR blunder. But while that's happening, BFA is poised for an 8-2 that, at least on paper, does seem to be going very much in the right direction. So let's kick off this extreme fun video with the Disney Vault, or sorry, should I say the Blizzard Archive, because yes, Blizzard Entertainment are emulating one of the most widely criticized business practices out there. Disney would do this thing where they'd release their content for a few years after cinemas, and then they'd cease production, and they'd just halt releases for a number of years, only to then come out with a special edition re-release, and this practice would allow them to create artificial scarcity and additional sale events. And this is all at the expense of the customer's convenience. No wonder people would want to pirate their content, because after all, piracy is a symptom of a service problem. Now, Blizzard's mount sale for the winter has done something very similar, but it's so on the nose it beggars belief. So the See You Later bundle features a number of store mounts, pets, and 3 transmog helms. Now, bundles have existed in the past, but well, the difference is that these are all being removed from the store after the event. Now, remember that paying to unlock an item, well, it's an item that's already in the game. There is 0 cost to it being on the store. So why remove it? Well, you remove it to create artificial scarcity and to generate more purchases, because players might be afraid that it's their last chance to own these mounts. Now look, all sales is a form of manipulation. Hell, most things are a form of manipulation, be it stated or be it overt. But sometimes the level of manipulation crosses a commonly agreed upon moral threshold, and often that is a moral threshold that we legislate on. And, we've made such things, some things illegal, such as, say, misleading customers. Now, this means that often companies need to have fine print, and that's great. We have the fine print. We know what's up. But the fine print of this bundle is just so funny because it's not even it's not in fine print. It is the footer of the announcement. So here's the quote. "We're sending 9 of our Blizzard shop and in-game store items into hibernation on January 6th. But before they go, you can purchase a time-limited bundle and save even more. Items in the See You Later bundle may return to the Blizzard shop and in-game shop at some point in the future." It's so clear. I mean, wow. These mounts are, they're going into hibernation, but for no other reason than to aid a sale pitch. Remember that these mounts cost nothing to have in the store. It's not even like you download a file when you purchase them. The file's already on your computer. Now, when a new store mount is released, it gets a special feature on the store. So it's not like these old mounts are taking up that much visual space or taking away from the new mounts on the store. The reasoning behind this becomes even more apparent once you look at the mount ownership statistics. As for the other stuff, it's a similar situation, but they're all quite old and they don't hold up visually to Blizzard's modern work. It's clear that these things were just not selling well, and Blizzard have realized that while they are in the store, they're not shifting copies, so in a move to increase their perceived value, they've just made them artificially scarce. Chances are that barely anyone actually wants these mounts, but because of the sales event and the fear of never being able to have them again, that's just going to tip people over the edge. Now, of course, they likely will plan on selling these again. There's the legal disclaimer is there. It's not called the Goodbye Bundle. It's called the See You Later Bundle. We'll see them later. Of that, I have little doubt. As the time on this promotion runs out, all I just want to say is this: please don't support this. If we reward these tactics by participating, we just encourage Blizzard to continue. And in a world where, as we're going to see later in this video, in a world where stuff's a bit more controlled by the finance department, the last thing we should be doing is giving the finance department more ammunition. Now, look, I mentioned finances, so it's time to talk about the influence of Activision over Blizzard. Now, this comes once again from one of Jason Schreier's reports, which, interesting, the first one was just his name was enough to make people throw it in the bin, which is kind of interesting because those people also seem to be the same people who are the harshest against Blizzard. Now look, as I've said many times, his work is often very solid, especially his investigative work. Often, he does make a bit of a tit out of himself on Twitter, that's for sure, but it's possible for someone to do both good and bad things. We shouldn't let those things cancel each other out. We shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Kotaku, yeah, they can publish a lot of trash, but they can also publish good things, so we need to take articles for, what they are in isolation. And given what else we've heard, and the previous Blizzard article, and all of the other investigative pieces, like for Mass Effect Andromeda and all that stuff, yeah, this stuff is fairly accurate. So even if you don't like the messenger, I think it's worth paying attention to the message. So the news broke via Eurogamer that Blizzard were expanding a voluntary redundancy program in their Irish offices, mainly affecting support staff. Now, the idea is that you get someone to leave of their own volition by essentially taking a deal. Now, for the staff, it's good because they get quick money, and that's brilliant if they want to make a career change, but they're also worried about their stability. For the company, it means that their least dedicated staff feel free to leave, and it means they don't have to lay people off, non-voluntarily, and that can be really expensive. And of course, by having those people go, it decreases their monthly burn rate. As a way of cutting costs, it's actually pretty great, and it is very employee-friendly, but it's also a bit revealing. Now, if a company is in a severe financial situation, then, layoffs may happen. But if a company is in a position where it basically is financially secure, but wants to tighten up its operation, that's when you'll see a program like this. So it does not mean that Blizzard are going out of business, but it does mean that yes, they are looking to cut their long-term costs in non-development areas. Now, this program called Career Crossroads has actually existed for years. The only thing that's new is they are offering it to a wider segment of staff, including more junior staff, and it seems to have had its financial benefits be increased. Now, this is all backed up by Jason's report, which again is sourced from many Blizzard employees. So, as we found out last time, Blizzard's new Activision transplant CFO told employees at an all-hands meeting that their big goal is to cut costs and shift more product. And this has resulted in the layoffs that I mentioned earlier, as well as the scaling back of Heroes of the Storm development and the sudden axing of its esports plans. Plans which, seemingly as of BlizzCon this year, were poised to go ahead. And that does make me think that this very much is a transition period that is ramping up. Now, on that topic, Jason's sources report internal rumors of layoffs in the new year. Now, that's interesting because layoffs being, talked about in this way, that doesn't seem voluntarily, like it's a voluntary thing, like in the Cork office. So yeah, what we see is non-development roles being axed while they try to hire more development roles. They're cutting costs, they're shifting more product. It's pretty clear that with Morhaime out of the way and more Activision influence, they are just trying to tighten up their operation. Now, what does this mean for games, the developers at Blizzard, and BFA? Well, in Jason's most recent report, 3 sources talked about how the finance department has more power within Blizzard than ever. One source said that their people are now attending more meetings, especially meetings that they would not have previously been involved in. So it seems systematically that this is indicating that the finance team is being more integrated with lower and lower level decisions at Blizzard. Now, if that seems like a bit of a worrying thing, then I think you should really listen to the next source. So, here's the quote. A lot of decisions now are being driven by business folks, marketing and finance folks. There's a real struggle now between developers and the business people. Strategic decisions are being driven by the finance group. And that's the worrying bit. Strategy. That's the long-term vision of the company. That's the direction that the ship is sailing in. This is affecting things such as the scope of a game. Not only the resources that can be allocated to a given project, but the actual likely design of a project itself, such that it would require fewer resources. Now, it's time to talk about the 80-20 principle. Generally, it asserts that 80% of the result comes from 20% of the work. And for the most part, it's actually quite true. Here's an example. With my time, while I might spend 70 hours a week working on the channel, maybe only 15 or 10 of those are actually spent writing. And ultimately, writing is the single most important thing that I do for the channel. Another way of framing the 80-20 principle is saying that perfection is the enemy of just good enough. It's the idea that at a certain point, working on something just doesn't make sense. You should just launch it out there and move on. Now, these are principles that personally I live my life by, but they have their dangers. And I feel that I can make those calls because I intimately understand every aspect of what I'm doing with this channel and just in general, and why people watch my content. But moving back to Blizzard, well, if a developer is appraising their game, they'll be able to decently tell when they put enough work into something that they can put it out the door, to work out where those diminishing returns are for doing further work. But here's the problem. A developer who has great understanding of their game can do that. But if that appraisal is being done by people who are above the developer and are not in a development role and don't really have that great of an understanding of the game, they're going to struggle to make as good a call in that situation. Essentially, finance people having too much control over the game design strategies of Blizzard is very likely not going to be good for the quality of their games. Now, I'm sure you've ran into the video of Steve Jobs talking about John Scully's disastrous tenure at Apple, and I think it is actually a really important video. It's worth listening to, so let's roll it.
John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay, but it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies, like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. Sort of the product sensibility and the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers.
So that's talking about Apple and Pepsi, but as applied to gaming, my worry is that the developer's first goal is to create something that's fun and that's engaging. They're going to design that from first principles, guided by an understanding of their player's emotional experience and how that drives them to play the game more. When the marketing types are driving these decisions, well, they want to also create something that's fun and engaging. They're not actually demon vampire people, but the difference is they're going to go and look at old numbers, and they're going to work out what the most cost-effective way is based on what has previously worked. And that's really the crux of it. Creatives make new numbers. Business people follow old numbers. As the business gets more involved, we're likely going to see a decrease in innovation and an increase in content that's strongly following the 80-20 principle, but with that 80-20 analysis maybe not being done by people, well, maybe by people who don't know the 80 from the 20. That's the struggle that Blizzard's developers face, and if they're not careful, the company's going to lose its unique status within the industry. Just look at Activision. They streamlined their business to be a small number of IPs. Large segments of their revenue come from something like, say, Destiny 2. And if those franchises, if any of that small number of franchises that they have start to struggle, you're going to see a big hit on the company. Now, I don't exactly want to bring in stocks at the minute because, especially if you look at, say, the FANG stocks, they've all went down. The markets have not been good over the last while. So as much as we can say, look at Activision Blizzard, it's trading at 50% of its value, it is also worth bearing in mind that we seem to be in a bear market, put it that way, so definitely that should be something to take with a pinch of salt. But that's really the point here. With this video, I know it's one of the first ones of the new year, it's when we all want to feel happy about the future and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, when I see Blizzard do something like the Blizzard Vault, I can't not talk about that. If I admit that, I just feel like I'm doing everyone wrong, so yeah, there you go. I guess a pretty hardcore video, right? Hopefully, stuff like this won't happen as much in the future. I wish I could say that I thought that was likely. I don't really think I do. I am generally quite worried right now about where things are going to go. One thing I do know for sure, it's going to be an interesting year to follow Blizzard, to do coverage for them. There's going to be a lot to talk about. I think my worry is that it's going to be the stuff that I feel compelled to talk about because I think it's a problem, and not the stuff that I feel compelled to talk about because it's like passionate and exciting. And that's ideally what this channel exists for. So let me know what you think about all this stuff down in those comments. As much as this is a bit odd, I hope you're off to a great start with this new year. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.